Welcome back, guys, to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have LaShonda Cooks, a Dallas based visual artist who loves exploring cultural norms, identity, and beauty through her images. Um, LaShonda, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Arnav. Hi, y'all. How are you doing?
Hey. So, set the scene for us where you grew up, what your family situation was like, and things of that nature.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Dallas, Texas, and I actually moved back here. I grew up here. I went to school in the Northeast at Babson College in Boston. And then after graduation, I came back home. So I'm actually living with my folks here in Dallas. I've been living with them for the last 10 years
Yep.
as I've chased this artistic journey. So
Yeah.
from that end, it hasn't been super glamorous, but I'm grateful. The one thing that I do have and I've always had is their support. So both my parents are teachers. They've been teachers most of my life. My dad's an art teacher. My mom has taught special education, but they're also both super creative. So again, my dad's an art teacher. And we would go to his class sometimes and, after school and just hang out and play around. My mom plays piano by ear and also reads music. So I have the creative genes deep down inside, but
Yeah.
that wasn't my plan. Like I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to be an artist. Like I remember being like fourth grade Shonda and being like, look, we need to make money. Like I like the arts. I want, this is fun. I like drawing. I like writing, but this is not profitable. So we need to just stay focused. So that was, if that puts you in my mind frame. Um, and growing up, I was pretty intentional, as intentional as you can be as a kid. So a lot of my activities were business centric. I like wrote out my business plan. I think um, in high school, early high school,
Wow.
I took some entrepreneurship classes. I took accounting. I took marketing. I went
Wow.
to this high school that was geared toward business. So
Oh,
I
okay,
had my
cool.
game plan, and then once I got to college, I kind of just I had an awakening, I guess, and it was like, look, we need to do something you actually like. So
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. That's me in a nutshell. But I'm the eldest of two, so it's me and my younger sister Candace, and it's just the two of us. So I think that experience kind of also made me very responsible. Like I was like big sister mode. Okay, let's be pragmatic. And then again, once I left, it was like it was just me and just Shonda. I can kind of say, okay, what do you actually like? What are you into? Like, what do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And it kind of reimagined everything. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So, especially given what you do now, do you
Mhm.
remember where your love for art started?
Yeah. So I remember the first real memory I have is like illustrating a children's book in the fourth grade. It was Makita and her dog, and it was this little girl that I imagined in Africa, and like this whole story of this exchange student coming here, and that was the first time I really remember like doing something like having this whole storyline and drawing it and having these all these characters, and I presented it to my teacher, and I was very very proud of it. So that's my youngest memory is like that one, very specifically like creating this project from start to finish and being feeling very proud of it at the end.
What do you I guess especially at that young age, what was it about art that drew to you or painting? Like what did you love about was it a sense of like, I mean, I don't even know if a fourth grader knows what therapy is, but like is it a sense of just like getting away from everything, or is it is it just you loved creating pieces that I don't know.
Yeah, so I've always been really shy. So I think that was my voice. That was my way of expressing myself. Like, if I had to describe myself, I was very quiet. I was like the ideal student. Like I was the teacher's pet. They didn't have any issues for me. But that was like what I would do, kind of, on my notes and just in between classes or in between thoughts, I would just doodle. So I wouldn't be talkative, but my mind was always going. So that was my way of getting my thoughts out and kind of being cool. Like, people would see that I could draw and they would like, oh, you did this. So that was a source of pride for sure. But yeah, I've always been really an introvert. So and I think that was one thing that I was like able to do that was cool, and that I was able to do it at my own pace, and a way of expressing myself without verbally having to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I don't know at that young age if you had any, but as you've grown, are there people that you look to as, inspiration of, you know, just viewing their creations and being like, you know, amazed at what they're doing?
Yeah, so in Dallas, there's an artist that we kind of grew up just knowing his name, Arthelo Beck. And he had a studio here in Southern Dallas. And I grew up with his artwork. Like literally, in my parents' house, we have his artwork. So I grew up around it and didn't really know, who he was initially, but just kind of in my mind's eye knew, this is an artist. And I've always been surrounded by the arts, even subconsciously. So I think he's always been an inspiration. And as I've grown to be an artist myself, I do look to him because he was self-taught. I didn't know that like initially, and he's like everybody has his pieces here, also internationally. There's a gallery named after him in Dallas. So yeah, I definitely look up to him. Currently, I like the masters. So like Monet, I love his style. I got to see an action Monet like whole exhibit here last year, and with the water lilies, and just to know that he was going, having some eye issues and going blind at the time, or while he was painting these incredible pieces. I'm like, wow, that's incredible. So it was like a whole room full of his pieces. That was phenomenal. But yeah, I grew up going to like the Dallas Museum of Art. um, I like Dali a lot. I was introduced to a lot of Latin American artists. So I studied Spanish, and Spanish 3, it was on arts and culture. So a lot of the artists that I initially kind of gravitated to, Frida Kahlo, Dali, all of them were, Latin American. And those were some of my first formal training in art history was, from that lens. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, as a kid, I would think Arthelo Beck for sure. Of course, you grew up wanted to be, looking at the illustrations for like Toy Story, Pixar. At one
Yeah.
point that was my ideal job. I was like, that'd be cool. Like I could do that.
Yeah.
Um, so that that's what I say would
Yeah.
inspire me from that age.
And then can you talk about as you transitioned to high school, how did Babson come on your horizon? As you talked about, it's probably not the most famous school in Dallas. So,
Yeah, I remember junior year. So my whole thing, I guess I was pretty intentional, and I knew that even though my parents had pretty good jobs, they're both teachers, but I also knew that I needed assistance to go to college. Like, so I was like, you need to get a full tuition scholarship. Like, here's the plan. And high school me didn't realize how rare that is. Like, it's not everybody doesn't have access to that. But I was like, I'm gonna be an A. I was a top student. I took very intentional classes, but I remember sitting down with my not college, my high school counselor, and being like, I don't know where I want to go to school. Like I was looking at University of Texas. I did know I wanted to go to the East Coast, so I was looking at one of my English professors, English teachers that I had for a couple of years. I'd had AP English with her, and she was very like, you need to apply to Wellesley. My daughter went to Wellesley, so she kind of pushed
oh,
me and was
okay.
like, look, you need
Gotcha.
to. This is a great school. It's a women's school. It's phenomenal. So I applied to that school under her tutelage, and then Babson came under my radar from my high school counselor, who she was like, if you're interested in business, this is where you need to go. But I think before she mentioned it, I had like a brochure that randomly came in. Like, in high school, you get all these brochures from
Yeah.
different colleges. And one of them was from Babson. And they said, you may be eligible for this full tuition scholarship. And I was like, what? It's like, I have never heard of this school. This sounds like a joke. Like, I remember just putting it to the side and we're like, this is not real. And when I sat down with her and she said, Babson. And that's what made me really look into it and say, okay, let's see what this is about. So back then they had one the Rico Scholar, which I still have it, but it's sponsored by the former CEO of PepsiCo, who was a Babson alum,
Mm.
and he wanted to give back to the Dallas community. So he has this scholarship, which when I was there was one a year, where it would be a full tuition scholarship for one student a year, as long as you lived in within certain zip codes and you met certain criteria, you were eligible. Now it's a lot more competitive because people know Babson a bit more. They had gotten up to about a few students a year, but when I went, it was one a year. It was one a year. That's it. So,
Yeah.
and it wasn't super competitive. So I got it, and
Yeah.
the rest is history. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess in terms of art, was there anything that you did that you look back on that you did right while you were at your time in Babson?
Yeah. So I think when I got there, I felt a little bit overwhelmed because we were in like this entrepreneurship bubble. So your freshman year, you are part of this company. You create a company within your class, and that's part of your schooling. We do a ton of group projects, and everything is business, business, business. So like I would yearn for my liberal arts classes, which we had really good liberal arts professors. Those honestly were my favorites, and I noticed that I was like, "Huh, you're really in tune to these classes. These are kind of like, hey, I'm here, but kind of in auto mode." So I sensed that in myself, and I sensed that I was thriving a bit more in those courses because I did feel a little bit have a little bit more gray area versus business can be a little bit more black and white. But I also was really involved in the arts, so I was in the theater group, the Babson Players. I started with them freshman year, and within basically every musical, every single year up to senior year, with the exception of junior year. Junior year, I had some other stuff going on. I was like, look, you need to get out of this. So life got a little bit crazy, but
Yeah.
yeah, I did that. I wrote for the newspaper, so I would constantly outside of class be trying to surround myself with other creatives and creative energy.
Yeah.
Another thing I did, Babson had a really good ceramic studio that was very underutilized. Um, and hold on one second, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a ceramic studio that was very underutilized, and it was right next to the dining hall. So I remember wandering in there like, what's this? What's back here? Like it was a back way entrance, and we had a very welcoming ceramics professor, instructor that was like, hey, come in, create. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I would go in there and just kind of escape for hours. And I noticed that how good that felt just to go in there and create and kind of get away from the exams and get away from group projects. And, I just felt myself gravitated to it. So the style that I do now is actually from that time at the ceramic studio where basically I was painting on tile. And when you paint on tile, you have to be like, you can't just stroke it. You have to like put it in like little, almost like little dabs. And that's essentially my style, which is, it kind of mimics a little bit of the masters, like post impressionists, so like Monet, post impressionism, a little bit of pointillism. At the time, I had no idea. I was like, "Oh, this is cool," and then when I got back home and started my practice, and started showing my work, I realized that that was something actually pretty masterful, and kind of zoned in on that.
You said you also studied abroad in several places. Can you talk
Yeah,
about the impact of that?
yeah. So my sophomore year, I did a winter theater program in London, where it was a 2-week course. It was about 12 of us, and from Babson that went there. We stayed in like this hostel, basically a formal hostel, the YMCA, and we would just go to all these different plays. So we went to about 10 plays over the course of the time there, and then we had to write up reviews and do an analysis and everything. So that was awesome because I've always wanted to go. Like as a little kid, I remember like reading about traveling around the rest of the world. I'm like, oh, I want to go to Europe and London and see um, the the soldiers with their furry hats that are attention, so that was like my kids' wish, just to go across the pond, and go to London. So that was my first trip. While I was there, we did do a day trip to Paris, which was on my list as well. So I got to go see the Mona Lisa and went to the Louvre, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, where am I? What's happening? And it just felt like very surreal and out of body. Um, and I'm grateful for that. I also, my senior year, I did, Babson had this new course called BRIC, which was for emerging economies. So it was Brazil, Russia, India, and China. At the time, um, it wasn't feasible to hit all four countries. So we just did Russia and China. So we did like a month and a half to 2 months in Russia, so St. Petersburg and Moscow, split in between the two. And then the other half was split between Shanghai and Beijing. So completely, I wanted to go after going to Europe. I was like, this is cool. I want something totally different for the next element, because where I felt truly kind of out of my element. So of course, Russia was definitely a bit different. We had to learn. We learned the alphabet. We learned some basic, conversational Russian. Um, because everything, was literally in Russian, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
which is interesting. And then in China, it was a little bit more foreigner friendly there, but we did learn some, basic Chinese as well, Mandarin, and that was phenomenal. I credit that, which is kind of giving me a sense of, okay, if you want to do something, you could do it. Of course, you need the proper tools and the preparation, but it's possible. Nothing is too outside of the realm of possibility. But also just learning to be comfortable outside of your element and learning to adapt and just getting some grit. Like, um, it wasn't an easy course. It was mostly writing, so a lot of essays. So that played to my strengths.
Yeah.
So I came out with, like, that year I was like one of the highest scores for that course, which is kind of cool. Like, you're trapped on the bride and you're like, oh yeah, let me write this essay. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a phenomenal experience for sure.
As you look back on your journey, was it hard for you to begin, you know, becoming an artist business, right? Because I think so many people have these hobbies of theirs and they maybe
Hmm.
do it on the side or anything, something like that. But they're, maybe, I don't know, maybe fear or something like that might be stopping them from, creating a business or selling their art or, you know, being open to commissions and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Can you talk about that process for you? When did you start that? Was that in college or was that after college where when you started selling your own art?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2010. I moved back to Dallas, and I was trying to figure out, okay, what do you want to do? Like, I knew I didn't want a traditional job. I knew I didn't want to be in anybody's cubicle or office. Like, that didn't suit what I wanted. So initially, I started like my own little marketing business where I would do graphic design. So at Babson, in our business that we started freshman year, I was the graphic designer. So I was pretty good at Photoshop. One of
Yeah.
my friends reminded me of this. They're like, "Yeah, you are a graphic designer." I was like, "I totally forgot about all of that." So all these different elements and different pieces and different experiences, kind of, when you look back, you're like, "Wow, it was really, kind of fortuitous." I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah. So I came back. I graduated, and I was like freaking out, trying to figure out what to do. And I had took on a retail job in the meantime. I was working for Ann Taylor. So I was like, look, whatever you want to do, you need some great clothes. This is women's professional clothing. We get a good discount. Let's go
Yeah.
here. So I worked there for a couple years. But while I was doing that, I would paint. Like, that was my therapy. That was my way of decompressing and like getting rid of some anxiety about, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right track? Am I going to reach these goals? And after that, I took on a job. I was talking to one of my college friends who I was in a writing course with, and she was like, "Shonda, you're actually a really good writer. Have you ever thought about journalism?" So I was like, "Oh, journalism." And I got a job freelance as a journalist where I was covering politics and education for this newspaper here. So while I was doing that, I was still drawing and painting on the side, and eventually I got into insurance adjusting, which is what I do now. I've been doing it for the last 8 years, but all the whole time I was still painting on the side. And I think it took pushes. It took a lot of pushes from my parents, pushes from my boyfriend at the time. It took pushes from all different angles saying, yeah, you're really good. You can actually sell this. Because I had no intention of selling it. It was just creating just for me. But once I had those pushes and I felt confident in, what I was creating, I was like, hey, you know what? This does look pretty good. I started off with my network at church. My dad, who y'all probably just saw him walk out, he basically contacted our pastor at church and said, hey, my daughter's an artist. Is it possible for her to have like a little table to vend, to show some of her work? And that was my first time, showing my work. I did outdoor festivals where you pay like $20 and you have your tent set up, you set up your work. I sold pieces there. And it's constantly, you're basically building momentum, and hopefully getting better and better. So you're getting into these different arenas. So I haven't done the outdoor festivals in a long time, thank God. But yeah, you connect with other artists who, tell you about other opportunities and shows. And eventually it does become a business. I do credit going to Babson, having a business background, we've been able to navigate some of the business side a little bit better. Like I knew, okay, you need to get a domain name, you need to get your website up, you need to have, set up a site on Etsy. So I kind of knew like general stuff like, okay, this is smart, let's do this, or let's set up, where you can sell, once I got into it and actually believed in my skill set. But it took me to feel like confident enough to show my work to get to that point. It also took some pretty intense criticism because again, you're trying to hopefully get better and better and to get into different arenas. So
Yeah.
from there, I remember going to my first art director and saying, "Hey, I'm an artist. I would love to show some of my work in your gallery." And she was pretty, she was pretty honest with me at the
Yeah.
time. She was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"You have the good design skills, but you need some more foundational art, like drawing skills." And she was like, "You need to just take some courses. I'm not saying go get your MFA. I'm saying you need to get some foundational stuff." So that type of thing as an artist, uh, honest, open feedback is important. It may not feel good. It may not, you know, it may hurt your feelings at the time. Like I remember hearing that and being like, "Oh, I'm not ready." Like she just like ripped me apart. And I was like, "Whoa, I wasn't prepared for that." But looking back, I'm like, "Yeah, she was 100% right." Like, so I did. I did take some courses at a local community college. I took some drawing courses, which I enjoy because this is what I like to do. So when you're interested and you're invested, you're it's not hard to invest in yourself, to want to be better. So even if it's self-taught, if you're going online on YouTube or wherever, or if it's a traditional class where you're literally sitting in front of a professor, I think that helped me elevate my work for sure. Because you again know these different techniques. You have a different practice. You have a process now. Instead of just saying, "Hey, I just want to paint something," you're like, "Okay, I need to do this first. I need to lay this out. These are the colors I want to use." You're a little bit more intentional about that process. So I credit all of that.
Yeah. I think if there's someone out there that's not where you are right now that may be looking to start, right?
Mm.
What do you have any pieces of advice on some of the things you did right, or maybe that were steps you needed to take because now that you have been shown in galleries
Mm.
and things like that.
Yeah, so this year I'm shown in two different galleries. One here in Dallas for the month of September, I think through November, and then I'm sorry, it's all running together. But I showed in a gallery, a pretty big gallery here in Dallas, in the show, and a show in Boston with my friend Jamal, who
Yep.
coordinated that. And then I'm actually curating a show for the African American Museum. I pitched them, and I have been pitching them for months. Like, hey, I have this idea. I think it'd be great. And I was just trying to find a way in. And eventually, I was blessed. One of my Facebook friends actually is an assistant curator for them. Had no idea
Yeah.
that's what she was doing. So, I'll be showing some of my work in a museum this fall, which is incredible.
Yeah.
I think the things I did right.
Yeah.
um, Connecting with fellow artists. So like, don't once you committed into it and you're like, hey, I'm an artist. I'm even just calling myself an artist took a process for me to feel comfortable, because again, I'm not classically trained. I'm self-taught for the most part. I have taken a few classes. I do, actively invest in myself, but I'm self-taught. To the average person, I'm not an academic artist. So just feeling confident going into those spaces, you have to be confident in what you're presenting. Um, I think as long as you're feeling confident and you stand behind your work, it'll work. Even if you're not, if you're in a space and they're like, this is not what I want, this is not necessarily what we show. Like I've had that happen before. You can still get some pretty good feedback, even if they're not ready for you or say you're not ready yet for that particular space. I think, putting yourself out there is important. Connecting with other creatives at different levels. So people that were coming in, emerging with me that are now, in galleries that are having this huge following, watching their journey as we watch each other's journey and know about different opportunities is very important. Also having like mentor artists, so even if they're not technically a mentor. So back when I was a journalist, I interviewed an artist, JD Evans. I went to his studio. He is a sculptor, and I was in awe. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is a working artist. This is a studio." Like that was my first time going in, and I remember telling him, I was like, "I paint too," and he was like, "I would love to see some of your work." I remember coming back and showing him some of my work and getting that push from him to go and show my work to the lady who ultimately was like, "No, you need to go and get these classes." So it's a journey, but I think looking back, I'm grateful for it, and I see how it all connected. Like even when I was disappointed or felt like, oh man, this is moving slow. Like what? I think I'm ready. Like all that connects. So I think just trust the process, trust the journey, connect with people, be willing to, put yourself out there. Sometimes they may say you're not ready. Sometimes they're like, yeah, this is perfect, or hey, just tweak this. Also, I think when you get feedback, you have to be very cognizant of it. So I've gotten some feedback that honestly I disagree with, and I'm like, nope, I'm not. I respect your opinion, because art is very subjective. So it's not like, hey, everybody thinks you're good, everybody thinks you're bad. Like it's going to be on that spectrum. So it's always going to be somebody that loves your work. It's always going to be somebody who's like, I don't really like it. Even now, I encounter both spectrums, and I just have to be very in tune with, am I proud of what I'm creating? Could I be better? Yes. So I sat down recently with another gallery director, and I'm like, yeah, I just finished this great show. I just had all this. We had all this press, and he was like, yeah, I would love for anybody, for y'all to sit down with me and come and basically pitch me a show. So I pitched him a show, and he was like, no, you're not ready yet. And that was devastating, because I'm like, I've been doing this. So I officially started showing my work in 2014, and that's when I started selling it. So I went for the first 4 years was just me creating and playing around,
Yeah.
which is important for an artist. Even when you're producing and selling stuff, it's important to have periods where you're just like, I'm just playing. Like this is for me. This is not to show. I don't want to show anybody this. This is a study. But yeah, I recently sat down and I was like, I had told myself, like, Shonda, you need to sit down after this. Like, it's been a crazy year, because I've had those two shows. I have this show coming up. I have another show with me and my dad, where it'll be his first show in the gallery, which is kind of
Nice.
cool. And then we're doing a dual show together. So I'm booked. I'm booked throughout the year, but that opportunity came up, and I was like, you know what? Let's shoot our shot. We're gonna go for it, and it got shot. It got shot down. So when he told me, he was like, I think you need to. I forgot how he put it specifically, which I respect that, but I was also like, you already had told yourself, that you're going to slow down and just kind of focus on, for the rest of the year to early next year, just focus on creating and kind of revisiting. Am I on the right path? Am I doing what I want to do? Can I be better? What can I do differently? And that's essentially what he told me. He's like, I think you should revisit and kind of play with your scale a little bit, and maybe different subject matter, and kind of back to the drawing board. But so I take some of that. I say that to say you're always going to get feedback. Kind of take it with a grain of salt. Pull out the stuff that's important and the stuff that's not accurate, or that you disagree with, or that you don't find to be true. These people don't know you. Like he didn't know me. He didn't know
Yeah.
my body of work. He knew what I had presented, and based off of that, he made some suggestions. So I think just keep all of that in mind. Like even if it's always multiple doors, it's multiple avenues. One of the things I've learned is how to create your own. Like, I don't have to go through your door. This is not the only door to go through to get
Yeah.
access or get my work shown. So just know that, for your process, like, if you have to go through another door, if you have to go through this window, like, and I think looking back, like I said, I see it all connecting and just working for the greater good.
Yeah. I guess what's your process nowadays to creating and art? Do you look to society for inspiration? Are you just you get in different moods and that's when you create, or what's your you listen to music, or what's your process?
Hmm. It's a mixture. So during COVID, these last 6 months or so, I've been working from home. I've had a studio the last 4 years, so that's different. Being able to having to work and create from home, but it's also been a blessing because I can like literally wake up in the middle of the night and be like, okay, I have an idea. Let me just do this now. Or I can get up early in the morning before my 9 to 5 job and put something down. What I do is if I have an idea, like I'll wake up out of my sleep and have an idea about something, and I'll wake up and like jot it down or type it in my phone because I don't want to ever forget anything. And I've learned that some of those ideas that are subconscious that come to the forefront, like while you're sleeping or while you're driving or doing something totally different, some of those are the best ideas ever. So I would say, I collect them. I collect them and then I'm like, let's revisit this. Um, During COVID and during the uprest socially, um, I had moments where I felt like creating, some moments where I was like, I don't want to create anything. I just want to veg out. I just want to watch TV. I just want to absorb whatever, get in my happy space. So for me, I think my creativity, it's always been a safe space and it's always been a space of happiness. So I don't try to make it, I try to avoid traumatic stuff. So I don't speak to the times as far as I'm not painting you know, the victims of police violence unless it's in a way that, I can process it. So I have some ideas that I'm working on now that are a little bit different, that I haven't presented yet because it's some stuff you create is just for you to process that, like, hey, I'm processing what's going on because it's on heavy on my heart and mind. And as an artist, that's what I do versus, what am I presenting to the world? um, I am influenced by music. I'm influenced by the world around me. So I love sketching. I love literally people watching and just sketching, or like going outside and sketching. And some of that sometimes that turns into an art piece. But it a lot of times it'll be thematic. So I'm working on a series on Black hair right now. Um, that was formulated for me coming to a poetry. I was at some show last summer, and I heard a poem that I was like, "Whoa, this poem is phenomenal." The poet unfortunately passed away last fall, but that poem sparked this whole series on Black hair, and he was just like, "Don't forget the women who twist, who braid, like the women behind the chair." So Black hair is it's a huge thing. It's a huge industry. It's political. It's economic. It's all these things. And based on me hearing that poem and just being there, I was like, had my wine. I was like, yeah, this is great. And then
Yeah.
that idea sparked this whole show that it'll be presented this fall at the African American Museum. So I think it's just me absorbing the world around me and kind of processing it. Um, in my own way. And art is again, it's kind of my voice and my way of speaking out, not necessarily, um, through what I'm seeing and processing it, and how I interact with what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hope that answered the question.
Yeah. 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 I guess as you look at your process now, what's the hardest part of being, an artist in the modern era, and I guess what's the most rewarding part on the flip side?
I think the hardest part is when you're an artist, you're everything. Unless you have a team behind you to help you promote, help you sell, you're the business, you're the creative, you're all of that stuff. So sometimes I wish, and I do it, but I like to like get off social. Like I have to be on social to a degree because my IG account is Shonda's art, and So I don't have a personal account separated from the art part. So if I'm like, I need a hiatus, I will kind of just not get on, but I'll still have to have my messages open. So if I have a message for somebody that comes through, which is what happened the last time I was off for like a month, and I would like people would message me and I would go in there, I would respond to the message and I would hop back off. So I think the hardest part is just kind of when you do need to decompress and renew and rejuvenate, you know, being very listening to yourself, not pushing through it. And which sounds wimpy. It's like, no, I don't want to, I think just knowing that balance, because sometimes you're like, I do need to finish this. Like I have this project, it needs to be done by November. It has to be done by November, regardless of what's going on, you know.
Yeah.
So I have to push through that, but also knowing, okay, giving yourself grace. Like, hey, can I take off today, and maybe, work late night tomorrow when I'm feeling inspired. So I think just kind of listening to yourself and knowing when to tune out, when to and giving yourself time to do that, even though it seems like, hey, I can't not be connected. It's like, yeah, you can. Like I've done it pretty successfully. Like I say, even if it's just a month and literally me just having to respond to messages if somebody says, hey, I'm interested in this, I'm like, oh, okay, great. And hopping back off. Or setting boundaries, like I'm booked for the rest of the year. Sometimes people may try to slide in and say, hey, but can you do this? And I'm like, I can't. I would love to. Unfortunately, it's not going to work for my schedule. So that's the hardest part for me. The best part, what I enjoy the most is just the sense of after something is completed and you have it in your eye, and then you write it down and sketch it, and then it goes to this completed product that you're proud of. It's like one of your your babies. So it's like, this is great. You kind of have this whole process, and then you see the final work. It makes it all worthwhile. The late nights, the early mornings, and it's something I enjoy doing. So that makes it easy. It makes it easy.
Yeah. What do you think is your? Do you have a favorite piece that you've made?
Ah, that answer changes every time someone asks me. Right
Okay.
now, my favorite pieces are normally the ones that I kind of struggle with. So the ones that I have an idea, this is where I see, and then I'm like, okay, how are you going to bring this out? So I have a process now where I typically do the background first. I used to not do that. I used to do the foreground. I used to hop right in and then circle back to the background. But it really is double work. So like I'll start with the background and then okay, build the characters on top of it. So normally, use a white like chalk marker or a white pencil or something to sketch everything in. So I have this piece. It's the biggest piece I've ever done. It's 36 by 48 inches. Um, and I started on it reluctantly because I'd had this grandiose idea in my head, and you're like, okay, what can I make this happen? And basically, it's this depiction of four women plus Nina Simone. So a lot of the pieces I do are based on icons. So Nina, I was interested in her one because she has an interesting backstory. She also struggled toward the end of her career with like bipolar, mental disorders, and but she's a phenomenal artist. Like I love her work, I love her music, and her music has inspired me. So I wanted to bring to life this song called Four Women, which basically she talks about these four black women. Each of them has its own very different story, its own very unique lens, and I wanted to put them together and do like an Alice in Wonderland Mad Hatter's theme around it, and so that's the concept. But bringing
Yeah.
it to fruition, and making sure that it looks good, that you look at it and you instantly are like, okay, cool, I see this, I see that, but also has some mystery around it where you're like, this is kind of gray area. I think I worked on it for the last 4 months, and I'm finally like, okay, I think I'm done. That's my favorite right now because it's been in my mind for the last 2 years, and it took me being at home at COVID to actually have the courage to okay, let's go for it. And it's huge. Normally, I work a little bit smaller, like closer to 12 by 24 or 1 by 2 feet,
Yeah.
so something smaller like that. But it's the hugest thing, and it's very personal. I'm like, oh, I got to do this right because I love Nina. I also wanted to tell her story, and that's what I try to do through the like the Alice in Wonderland lens, and because it's so rich and it has so many different elements that you can pull in. Like for her, the title of that piece is "We're All Mad Here." So dealing with the concept of madness, as in, from a mental health standpoint, but also mad as being like playing with the idea of the angry Black woman, which is a stereotype. And this is such a loaded piece, and I think I did it justice. So that's why it's my favorite right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Y- I don't know, like, if this is a fair question, but how do you feel, art diversity is doing in, in portraying, for example, black females and, you know, things of that nature? How do you think the art world is doing overall?
I think the art world is doing a better job at providing opportunities for artists like myself to present our lens. So, especially since the protests and the Black Lives Matter kind of resurgence, a lot of institutions have been forced, or some have been forced and some have adapted on their own to create these opportunities. So that's part of the reason why I'm so crazy busy right now. Like the show that we did at the gallery here in Dallas was created directly in response to that. So it was 12 Black artists. It was curated by Black artists, and they were very intentional about choosing the gallery and saying, "Hey, we want to do something, and this is the idea." And they created that space for us. So I think the best thing that you could do is provide opportunities for artists of color to show their lens. Like I don't speak for all Black women; it's impossible. But I can speak for me, LaShonda, from my lens on what that Black womanhood looks like for me. And I think, when you have people in the room that are able to kind of shape their narratives and share their own, it's a richer environment overall. Um, so I'm thankful, especially here in Dallas. There's been a ton of opportunities. I was almost been overwhelming. Like different galleries have providing opportunities for equity because it has been a very like I mentioned, I've had opportunities specifically where I've come and sat down with gallery directors and they said, no, 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 we're not ready for you. Those have been in Black spaces for
Mm.
the most part, which is interesting. I
Yeah.
have, so I can only imagine what the conversation would look like if it were a space, and if it were in a space where, their primary artists that they serve or that they represent doesn't look like me and doesn't have my lens. Like, so I think that they're trying to be more provide opportunities and remove that stigma, for even from them, from me not even feeling comfortable, as a Black artist going to them that it's self-taught. Even though I've had my work is well received, I have these credentials behind me to show I've been doing the work. I'm not overnight. I've been doing this over 6 years, and I think they've been trying to be more accessible. To open their doors and saying, hey, um, come on in. We have opportunities for you. We have ways to kind of coach you as far as gallery representation and legal side of it, and how to get a gallery to represent you, et cetera. That type of thing. Even though I have a business background, I don't specifically know the inner workings of the art world and how these people behind closed doors, what goes on. So I think that's important. But I have seen a shift lately, and that's part of the reason why I'm booked through the end of the year. Like I've been booked since August, and like I have no, I mean, that's
Yeah.
never happened before. And part of it is people actively seeking out Black creatives. Say, hey, can you do this for me? Can you do that? Or hey, we have an opportunity. You can show your work here, or you could do your show here.
Yeah.
So I think locally they've been doing pretty good. I'm excited, and hopefully it's open other doors for specifically for Black creatives, but also for other artists of color, so that we feel comfortable in those spaces. Like part of the thing is you have to kind of put yourself out there, but you also want to want to feel like there's there's a sense of almost like a safety net underneath there, so you're not like just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
when you go in there and you leave with your tail behind your between your legs. You want to make sure that it's before I approach people, I try to research it and make sure that it's something that aligns up, and that's important. What
Yeah.
kind of work are they showing right now? What kind of people do they show? What kind of work are they drawn to? Even though we all have a different lens, they may be looking for something different. But yeah, I think just getting more people in the room and more people that look and represent different perspectives will create this confidence so that, artists, emerging artists and people that have been doing it for years that may want to kind of take their work to the next level, feel confident, coming in that space and showing it. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned something early in the interview about living with your parents. I think that um, that is something a lot of people are having to do with
Mm-hmm.
COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a sacrifice a lot of, you know, entrepreneurs like yourself have to do, in trying to fulfill, their dream. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about what that's been like, and what you've learned from that?
Yeah, I had to humble myself for sure. That wasn't part of the plan.
No.
When I moved back to Dallas, I'm like, yeah, let's get my own spot. But it just wasn't initially. It wasn't financially feasible. Now it's possible. Like I've started house looking, but I'm like, I also want to. It's been an interesting experience. My parents are pretty chill. My little sister lives in New York, so she's away. So it's almost like a friendship. So you get to see them. They see you as an adult. You see them as people, humans outside of your parents, and with their own interests and their own identities. So that's interesting. Um, I'm grateful. I didn't not think I would be grateful for it, but it's taught me a lot about myself. It's taught me a lot about them and my family history. I think it's made me, have to kind of humble myself and say, you know what, you don't necessarily need your own like house or your own apartment space for just you. Like you can do what you want to do here. Like we have a huge house. Like why let's save this money. Let's be financially reasonable. Like I'm saving right now because I do want my own home eventually. But I'm like right now I want to help them. We have an older house that was built in the 1950s and we're trying to, it needs upkeep and certain things. So I'm like here, I'm like, I can help you. I can help you with this. Let's get this taken care of. Let's get that taken care of. So I'm grateful that my priorities have shifted a little bit to where I'm not like I need to have this just so I feel like I'm an adult. Like you can be an adult and adulting and still live with your folks. So it's been phenomenal. And also, because I am here, I let them know about what I have going on. They're some of my biggest supporters for my shows.
Yeah.
Um, and they're super proud. They're proud. So just to see that, hopefully one day I'll be billion dollar artist, and I'll be worth it. They're like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is the plan. So that's the goal. But I'm grateful for that experience and the time with them, because I know time is not promised to any of us. So to have that time where I'm connecting with them and able to have dinner or able to do these small things, like my dad and I work out. Like we go work out, we go walk around the neighborhood. Especially during COVID, like we all had our own individual gym memberships, but with everything shut down, you know, that was one of our things. Or we'll garden. I'll go outside and garden from time to time. So just experiences like that, that's priceless. So
Yeah. I think that's an awesome perspective to,
yeah,
with the gratitude, because I think so many, I have no idea why this is the case, but it feels like in America, it's always a negative.
it
And
is.
everything that you said, it's been so like positive and so not, and it's all so true, especially the time aspect. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I was really embarrassed. I was like, "Oh, you need to get out. Like, what are you doing?" And I was like, "You know what? What is this about?" And it's an American thing, but I think it's also cultural. Like certain cultures, like I feel like in Hispanic cultures, they'll have multi generational people. Like certain cultures they have it for black people in particular. I think we're not typically like that. We're like, you need to get your own spot. You need to have your. This is a sign of success. This is how you show you've made it. Like you're out of the house and I was terrified of not meeting that metric. And I was like, look, you have until I'll be 33 in December. And I was like, look, you've been out of school 10 years. It's time. So I was like, during COVID, I was, the insurance rates had gone down for houses. I'm like, this is the time. You need to start looking. And I started that process. And I'm like, wait, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? Like, so I think just check your purpose and your why, what's motivating you. Like is it motivated by so you can say, hey, I have my house, here it is, and then I'm gonna still be over my parents house, you know what I mean, like chilling with them, or So I just had to kind of reevaluate and reset my values and say, okay, is this for you, or so you can say this to other people. So
Yeah.
I'm still definitely wanting it, and I'm definitely saving, but I'm not in a huge rush.
Yeah. Um, we talked a good amount about different things. Was there something that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
Oh wow, I think we covered everything. My biggest thing is just like I said, just trust the process. Even though you may feel whatever you want to do, it may seem like impossible. It may seem too huge. I say make it bite sized. Like that's how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So okay, what can I do today to get me one that much closer to that goal? And then I would just say, whatever you believe in. Like I'm Christian, but I think I'm more spiritual than anything. And I'm like, I try to make sure that everything else is in alignment. It's like, so if I, you know, make sure my intention is correct and make sure that I've had the right mentality, typically it works out. Like it's what has happened in my life, and I'm grateful for it. It's like almost overwhelming. You're like, wait, I did this random class, and that ended up being how I met this person who pushed me here, and then I ended up here meeting this guy who started my art career. Unofficially, like it's crazy. It's crazy. So I think also take a look back, take a step back. Sometimes when you do that, it gets you out of this where you're at right now and like hustle mode to see, okay, wow, this has worked out. So it gives you inspiration to keep going for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great piece of advice. For people looking to maybe see the work that you've made and maybe even support you, follow you on your social media. Do you want to let them know how they can do that?
Yeah. So Shonda's Art, SHONDASART.com. Or you can follow me at IG on IG at Shonda's Art. And that's the easiest way to reach me. Also see my latest and greatest.
Yeah, yeah. LaShonda, thank you so much for being on. I just want to acknowledge you. It's always great to see people, go after their dreams, right? So, I think it's just, and it's been cool to hear your story because I think much like a lot of people, it wasn't a straight linear path. It was, you got pushed from your family and then you showed it at your church and then you went to festivals and now you're at a point where you're booked for the rest of the year. I mean, and it's just so
Yeah.
it's all it's a it can be a roundabout and up and down, but it's great to see that you're still going after your dreams every day and producing art and obviously as we talked about, you know showcasing your perspective and I think that's just so important, especially given what's gone on in 2020 with you know um, the social reckoning, but just always in no matter what the year to continue to represent your voice and your perspective. So just want to thank you for being on, and
Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you so much. This has been
yeah,
fun.
thank you.
Alrighty.